This is Mr. Stubby coming to you from behind my garage again today. Today is Thursday. Yesterday I was behind my garage because many of the plants that we're talking about live in moist, shady areas, and the ones we're going to talk about today also do for the most part. Today, listen for the word of the day. I'll mention it sometime in the screencast, and it'll be an easy point on the next test. So listen for that word of the day again. Quick pop quiz here. This one will not be for credit, but this is what we would normally give you if you were in regular class today. I'll put the five, actually there's a sixth question as well here. We'll put them on here, give you a moment to pause, and then we'll go over the answers together. This is number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then number 6 is on this next slide, naming this structure up here. So if you want to go ahead and hit pause at this time, otherwise we'll go through them. Okay, so number 1, name the 3 basic types of bryophytes. Those included the mosses, the most common ones, which I think I showed you yesterday from right behind me on the ground here. Liverworts also happen to live in this area, small like mosses, but kind of more of a leafy sort of gametophyte or structure they have. And then the hornworts, so mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. Number 2, what term or symbol is used to describe the number of chromosomes in the gametophyte generation in plants? That term is haploid, or N as it's written for the symbol. This means they have one set of chromosomes only. And the gametophyte are the ones that make the gametes. So just remember that the gametes, the sperm and the eggs, are haploid. So therefore the plant that makes them is haploid also. Number 3, which generation is dominant in mosses? That should be the gametophyte or haploid generation. Number 4, what's the difference between antheridium and archegonium? Anther, remember, sounds like antler, the male part of the deer. Antheridium is the male part of the plant. It produces the sperm, and then the archegonium is the female part, produces the egg. Number 5, why is standing water needed by bryophytes? Bryophytes have swimming sperm. The sperm actually have to swim outside from plant to plant, so they need the water to do that. And number 6, name this structure. Okay, this part here is the sporophyte of the moss. Down here, this bottom part is the gametophyte, which is the green part really, what you mostly see. Sporophyte has a stalk and a capsule that contains the spores. Hopefully you saw in that video yesterday where they tapped out the capsule and the spores kind of went blowing off like dust. And lastly on this moss down here are the rhizoids, which are the root-like structures. So looking at the cladogram of plants again, plant ancestors we think was some green algae kind of organism. Simplest kind of plants are these algae, green algae. They have no cell specialization, no tissue, and no embryos. Over here, next most complex group are the mosses and other bryophytes. They have embryos, which are basically miniature baby plants that have specialized structures. So we saw the sporophyte, the gametophyte, and so on. Today we're going to bump this up one more notch and include it onto specialized structures is what's called true water conducting tissue, also known as vascular tissue, which is a lot like our vascular tissue, our blood vessels. It's there to carry items, and they're cells that are long tube shaped. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the seedless vascular plants, and evolution for a vascular tissue is a key step for life on land. I'm going to compare vascular tissue to like this bundle of straws I have here. I don't know if you can see that. I just taped a bunch of straws together, and they're a bunch of tubes, and this is real important because if you think about this, these straws are very strong. So this allows these plants to stay upright like this shrub over here with these strong stems to resist gravity. It also allows them to carry water long distances. The mosses really didn't have that method. All they could do is basically soak water up by osmosis, maybe an inch or two in height, so they never could become dominant plants on Earth. However, this fern, here by the way is an actual fern from my house, has this vascular tissue, and you can see the upright stems that allows them to stay strong and resist gravity. Okay, that's really, really important. Okay, so here's just an image of this. Here's a plant stem, and here is a microscopic view of this vascular tissue. This is what we call longitudinal or a long section. So if I took these straws and looked at them from this view, this it might be something I would see in the plant. We see these strong, solid cell walls, which really provide like the framework of these plants. Okay, in addition to carrying water. So the vascular plants, their scientific name, by the way, is a tracheophytes. A phyte, again, means plant. They contain tracheids, which are these tube-like hollow cells, okay, much like these straws here, okay. This is one of my favorite kinds called the horsetails. You may have seen these. They almost look like little bamboo plants. They grow quite a bit around here in ditches and other wet areas, okay. Two types of vascular cells. We call them xylem and phloem. Xylem is a special kind of vascular cell which carries mostly water. I want you to remember that, water. And they also carry some minerals. And they're carrying it mostly from the roots upwards to the rest of the plant. Okay. The phloem, on the other hand, carries sugars mostly, sugars that are made in the leaf, to other parts of the plant, mostly downwards to places like the roots that can't make their own sugars. So xylem and phloem. Let's take a look at those here. This is a cross section of a plant stem, sort of like if I took this stem, cut it that way, and looked at it this way. A typical plant stem will have these vascular bundles. Each of these little dark rings is a vascular bundle. If you've ever eaten celery and you've got no stringy thing stuck in your teeth, that's basically a vascular bundle. Okay, on the outside is the phloem here, kind of darker stained purple, has very thick cell walls. And then on the inside, I'll show it on this other vascular bundle, are the xylem. Xylem come in a couple different sizes. These very large ones here, and then the smaller ones kind of in between. So a little more diversity in size in the xylem cells than there are in the phloem cells here. Okay. So water, again, mostly moving upwards, and sugar is mostly moving downwards in the stem, the sugar being in the phloem and the water being in the xylem. Okay, and by the way, just to switch topics here a little bit, I want to give you the word of the day, so listen carefully here. Write this down if you like. The word of the day for today is garage. Okay, garage. Remember that. Okay. On to types of seedless vascular plants. All right, there's three major categories of them. I only can show you one type here. There's a lot of these growing around the area. There's a forest not too far from my house here where I could find some of these. You may be able to find some of them in your house or around your houses. So let's just talk about some of those here. The club mosses, I put this in parentheses because it's not a true moss like a bryophyte like we talked about yesterday, but they kind of look like mosses. They're sometimes called ground pines. Again, we put pine in parentheses because it's not a true pine. So this is a club moss or ground pine. Look like miniature little pine trees. They're maybe about 6 inches tall. The horsetails we talked about before is another group. And then the ferns, probably the most common one. Ferns, pluck a little leaf off this one here. These leaves are called fronds. Okay, maybe you've heard that term, maybe from Finding Nemo, you might remember that. A frond is a leaf in a fern, and in other types of plants that term is used as well. So, all right. Now, in life cycles of these, the sporophyte now becomes dominant over the gametophyte. And what do we mean by that? Well, what you're looking at mostly when you look at a fern is the diploid or sporophyte generation. Okay, the gametophyte is very small, and we'll look at that in just a second. These plants produce spores on sporangia, okay, special structures. Now, depending on what kind of plant it is, they may have those sporangia in different places. Some ferns actually have them on the bottom of the fronds, and they look like these little brown or sometimes orange spots. And some people think these are a disease, and they aren't. Those are the sporangia. The type of fern I have here today actually puts them on something, a sporangia that looks like this. You may have seen these in the woods before. It almost looks like a bird's feather. This is a sporangia from last year, okay? These are, by the way, the fronds from last year of this fern. The one I showed you here is actually from the inside of my house. And if we look closely enough, this camera lined up, here's a frond from this year's growth. And these fronds are actually curled up a little bit. They're called fiddleheads because before they actually form, they're kind of tightened up and then they'll uncurl. And this is a cluster of this year's that'll soon be full-grown fronds. Deer and other animals love to eat these. They're tender and very nutritious. So, On the club moss, they actually get their name club moss because, if you can see the pointer here, the sporangia actually looks like a little club, a little bat-shaped thing growing out of the rest of the sporophyte. Okay. Now, typical life cycle, again, like any plant, we see what's called alternation of generations. Alternating between what? Do you remember? I can hear you all saying it right now. That's right. They alternate between the sporophyte and the gametophyte. The sporophyte is the part that makes the spores. So here's one of those sporangium on the bottom of the frond. This thing will crack open here. And this is actually kind of a little spring-loaded mechanism that'll shoot these spores out. Those spores, again, are single-cell reproductive parts that will blow in the wind, land someplace moist, perhaps, and then start growing by mitosis into a young gametophyte. This is a little heart-shaped gametophyte, probably about, if you take a look at your pinky fingernail, maybe a quarter that size. They're very small. Looks like a little lily pad here. They'll have antheridium, the male part, and archegonium, the female part. The antheridium will make the sperm. The sperm has to swim over to the egg again. So that's why these ferns and other seedless vascular plants grow in fairly moist areas. They have swimming sperm. It'll fertilize the egg inside the archegonium, and then it'll form the zygote, the diploid zygote, which begins the, you guessed it, the sporophyte generation again here. The sporophyte begins to divide by mitosis and grow up and through that gametophyte and become basically the whole plant, the whole fern here like I have. Okay, this is all sporophyte we're looking at. If we go down in the soil here, we're not even going to really find a gametophyte anymore. It's shriveled up and dead long time ago. Okay, so in this group of plants, the sporophyte becomes the dominant generation. So there you go. There's a little bit on seedless vascular plants. Tomorrow we'll talk more about the seed plants. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the weather. Actually, it's Wednesday for me today. Pretty nice day. By tomorrow, I think it's going to be a little bit cooler. So anyway, enjoy the outdoors.